because we have an American public today that really can't tell right from wrong, fact from fiction anymore. They're far more inclined to vote entertainment before they ever vote for truth. But that's a reminder of something. Conservatism isn't enough to really help people, regular average Americans, really appreciate truth. We need to go beyond that. And that's where I think Christianity truly plays a part. And this goes back again to the question about Christians and Democrats. Christianity teaches a renewed nature, a nature that will appreciate the truth when confronted with lies. And it doesn't mean that Christians get this right all the time. I'm just simply saying this, that because Christianity has an emphasis upon objective truth and cares about the truth, even if you don't agree with the objective truths that we come up with, it is undeniable that Christianity is a historic religion based upon historical truth, and we care about the objective reality of those things. And if we do, then it might be a great defense for a political candidate who actually tells the truth, which is really what America needs now more than ever. And speaking of personality, the next story I want to go through is how George Santos was just recently expelled from the House. Here's that.
This year in Congress appears to be a lock for the history books. It began with a headlock during the unprecedented 15-round vote to elect a U.S. House Speaker. It continued with months of gridlock and the first ever ouster of a U.S. House Speaker. And then there were all the deadlocks, twice flirting with shutdowns of the federal government. And it ends with a change in the door locks of former New York Congressman George Santos, only the third U.S. House member since the Civil War to be expelled. He's pleaded not guilty to fraud, conspiracy, and fleecing his campaign donors. I asked one of Santos's fellow New York House Republicans if the booting of Santos would cool or aggravate the tensions that have boiled over throughout this year in this Congress, and he responded, "We'll see."
Maybe you got the flavor of that clip. Essentially, it sure seems that the media is once again trying to blame Republicans for basically everything. I mean, you need somebody to act as the scapegoat when you are destroying everything that you possibly can. But the idea is this, is that the Republican House is in disarray. They just got rid of their speaker and they got a new guy, and we don't know about that guy because he actually reads the Bible and things. And then you got Kevin McCarthy elbowing a dude, and now they're expelling another fellow Republican. It's just total disarray everywhere, and Republicans are all to blame. Well, I want to make an argument, and that argument is simply this, that I don't believe that Santos was a Republican. And even if he was, the fact that they got rid of him actually is a good thing. Only in a twisted world or in the mind of a Democrat would you be able to come up with the conclusion that when you hold somebody accountable for wrongdoing and for fraud, that actually somehow that's a sign of disarray. It's a sign that things actually are working. But let me go back to the idea that Santos really wasn't a Republican in the first place. So let me go over the reasons for his expulsion, and you tell me if those things fall more in line with people on the left or people on the right. So he was expelled for fraud, including stealing card numbers from donors to buy personal items. He even stole money from a veteran. He apparently was involved in raising money to get a dog for a veteran, whatever they call those support animals or whatever, for a veteran, and apparently took all the money and ran. He was also in trouble for sexual harassment based upon his past of cross-dressing and support for the LGBTQ community. I can only imagine that he sexually harassed a man. And he was known as a cross-dresser, as I mentioned before, and also attended LGBTQ events in the past. He lied about his mother being in the Twin Towers on 9/11. And the funniest one, he used one of his campaign staffers to impersonate Kevin McCarthy so that he could solicit donations. Now, that may not be proof positive that he was a Democrat, but I think there's some things glaring out of all of those facts that I just read that suggest that he is. But how about this? In the last two issues Santos had to vote for in the month of November, Santos voted present, which is just a way of saying that I'm not going to be yes or no on this thing. I know there's a lot of reasons that you can do it, but essentially if you don't vote in the affirmative, especially on issues that really seem clear-cut, then it is typically because you don't want to take a position because you don't believe it is politically expedient. Now, let me tell you what these two issues were. The first one was a bill that was essentially called the No Funds for Iranian Terrorism Act. So no more money for Iran Act. And instead of voting no on that, which you would think if he was a Republican would be pretty clear, he voted present. And he also was asked to vote on the Protecting Communities from Failure to Secure the Border Act, which would give federal funds to those places that are being impacted negatively as a result of the border policy of Biden. And of course, he voted present for that one as well. Again, one that you think would be kind of a no-brainer. Now, I don't know the nuances of that bill, I'll admit, but I can tell you one last thing, that there have been 6 lawmakers expelled since the history of our republic. And every single one of those outside of Santos was a Democrat. Now, you can make the argument that Democrats have just historically been a party that holds people accountable, or you could make this argument, rather, that Democrats are the party of slippery and slimy liars that are much more prone to immorality than those who are on the right, which are stereotypically much more religious. Now, this doesn't deny the fact that there are slimy and sleazy Republicans. I get it, there are. It doesn't deny the fact that there are people who claim to be religious that are using it as a tool. I get it. But by and large, especially with a guy like Mike Johnson, the people who claim to be truly faithful religious followers are way less likely to do the kind of things that you see the Democratic Party do on a regular basis and that you just saw Santos do. Not to mention, Santos also was elected in New York. Now, he did it as a Republican, no doubt, but he also did it with a whole lot of extortion and lies. Again, something I would argue largely finds its home more on the left than it does the right, especially in modern society. So my argument is simply this. One party is way more immoral than the other. Republicans lie too, but Democrats do it more often, which I think makes Santos at home in the Democratic Party. And maybe he'll think about running again in their party, and they'll be much more protective of him probably in the future. But more importantly, the Christian side of this, the Christian in me wants to just say this to all of you, whether you're a Christian or not. The reality is that we have to pick a side when it comes to being moral. We can say that you can't legislate righteousness in society as a Christian, and that's true. You can't make laws that make people righteous, but you can legislate morality. You can make laws that save babies. You can elect Supreme Court justices that overturn Roe v. Wade and saves tens of thousands of lives of babies. You can do that. And if you have the moral courage and bravery to actually take a step back and start illustrating what good morals look like from a biblical perspective, you find out really quickly that there is no moral middle ground on many of these issues, if any of them whatsoever. And once you start illustrating where you really stand on these issues, you'll understand that you are clearly on the right side of the aisle. So you don't want to play the semantic game. Okay, I get it. Call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. But if you find that you take a moral position and you consistently find yourself on one side of the aisle and not the other, then you may want to think about actually taking a side. You may want to realize that polarization actually has a purpose in society. It makes ideas and thoughts very clear, and it helps us understand which side we should stand on. The Republicans clearly showed which side they stand on. They stand on the side of truth, and they stand on the side of not wanting a guy that continually sexually harasses people and steals money anywhere near them. And I can't help but believe that that makes them morally superior. So yeah, if they have a moral high horse, it might be because they earned it. Nonetheless, let's jump into our final segment, Bible Study with Democrats.